Hi friends, it's Walter Zemrock here with a new video featuring the October Autumn Breeze card kit. Come create with me as I make 4 designs. Don't forget to give it a like. This first card uses an A2 top fold navy card base, a white card panel cut to 4 inches by 5.25 inches, the Autumn Breeze stamp set, specifically the girl with the umbrella for this card and the leaves, a piece of the ephemera, this beautiful frame, as well as the hickory smoke and worn wood distress oxide inks. I used the wet stamping technique in this first card. I adhere my card stock down to my stamping platform, spritz it with water so that you see the water bead. Go ahead and take the Distress Oxide ink, this time Hickory Smoke, and stamp your image. You then pick it up and hold it so that the water drips down the cardstock, giving it that nice dripping effect. Once dry, I put my cardstock back on the stamping platform, and this time stamp over the image with the Weathered Wood Distress Oxide ink. And that's to darken up the image. But the great thing is you don't lose that dripping and shading that you got with the original stamp. I then positioned my sentiment and the 4 small leaf stamps and went ahead and stamped those using the Weathered Wood Oxide ink. I then took the Hickory Smoke and tapped it onto my glass crafting surface, spritzed it with water, and used a paintbrush to add some splatter onto the card. I feel that the splatter only enhances that drippy look and also creates faux raindrops. I'm really happy with how that turned out. I take some double-sided adhesive, put it onto the back of the card panel, and adhere it down onto my card base. I'd be sure to fold any excess adhesive over the sides onto the card panel. And before adhering it down, I run the Weathered Wood Oxide ink around the edges just to give it another little touch of color. I put some double-sided foam tape strips in certain places around the back of the frame where they can easily be hidden. And use my scissors to snip any places where they need to be trimmed a bit. And I adhere the frame down onto the card. I really like the way that this card turned out. To me, it really feels like a rainy day. For the second card, I use a piece of the light yellow cardstock that is trimmed down to 4 inches by 5.25 inches, a brown top fold A2 card base, a cute piece of the ephemera of the couple, as well as 2 of the floral swag ephemera pieces. I'll use a sentiment from the stamp set, as well as the Hey Girl stamp set. I use this background and it turns out beautifully. To begin, I adhere my card panel and the Hey Girl background stamp onto my stamping platform. And then I grab a yellow ink, a red ink, and an orange ink. And my idea here is to create an autumn ombre heart background for this lovely couple. So I load up the stamp with each of those colors and go ahead and stamp it down onto my cardstock. I know I'm going to have to stamp it again, so I load up with the same 3 colors in the same positions on the stamp. And it's okay if they overlap a bit because it just creates a more interesting ombre effect for your stamping. And then I stamp it down. And I decide to do it a third time just to make sure that it's a nice dark background. So I load up my stamp with the 3 inks and then stamp it down onto the card panel. Happy with that background, I put my card panel onto my stamping platform again, so that this time I can stamp my sentiment up at the top of the panel. I stamp it using a nice dark brown ink that will blend in nicely with the overall autumn motif of the card. I stamp it twice just to make sure that it's nice and crisp. I then use a blending brush and some tea dye distress ink to go around the edges just to give it a little bit of extra color and a little bit of an extra distressed look. And I then run the ink pad along the edges of the card just to make sure that there's some color there. It's a nice little detail that can really set your card apart. Happy with all of that, I put some double-sided adhesive onto the back of the panel. I adhere it down and then put double-sided foam tape strips onto the back of my pieces of ephemera and adhere those down onto the card. I start with my floral swag to make sure that I'm happy with the position of each piece, and that makes it easier for me to center this lovely couple in between them. I adhere the couple down, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. It really is a beautiful autumn card for a couple. For the third card, I use an A2 top fold navy card base, a piece of the patterned paper that's cut to 4 inches by 5.25, another piece of the patterned paper that I'll use to cut out some leaves. I use the stamp set. I use a piece of the ephemera, and I use the leaf die. I begin by ink blending some tea dye around the edges of the 4-inch by 5.25-inch patterned card panel. Just getting some color around the edges and lightly blending into the center. I then move to antique linen to help just blend that into the center and add just a little bit of lighter shading into it. I take the other piece of patterned paper and cut 3 leaves without the intricate inside part out of the paper. I'm only going to use 2, but I make a third just in case I need it. I take the vintage photo distress ink and a blending brush and add some vintage grunge onto the leaves, just going around the outside border of the leaves and getting the stems, and then lightly tapping the inside to get some color there. I then use the scorched timber and go around the outside edges of the leaves with my brush just to darken them up a bit and kind of give them that fallen leaf look. You can skip this step, but it's an extra detail that I think really adds a lot to the design, and it's these small details that set your cards apart. Done with that, I take my sentiment and I line it up onto the first leaf. I put it on my stamp platform and I stamp the first two words of the sentiment onto one of the leaves using a dark brown ink. As I put the ink on, I make sure that I'm only getting it onto the first part of the stamp so that I don't have any other area of the leaf getting it. I then repeat the same with the second leaf, but this time only putting ink on the second two words of the sentiment. I use my finger and a little rag to wipe off any ink that might get onto one of the first two words. Can you tell how much I love to add some vintage grunge? I use my brush to do it to the ephemera. And I adhere the card panel down onto the base with some double-sided adhesive. I then use craft glue to glue my two leaves into place. I wanted them juxtaposed with one at the top and one at the bottom, but each at an angle to really make it look like a falling leaf, especially since the words falling leaves appears on one of the leaves. I adhered my ephemera down with double-sided tape and then used craft glue to put 3 dots onto the card. I then take the three beautiful green leaf gems and adhere them down onto the card as a finishing touch. And just like that, our third card is done. For the fourth card, I'll be using a brown A2 top fold card base, a piece of the wire mesh material cut to an A2 size, and two card panels that are cut to 3.75 inches by 5 inches. I'll be using the acorn ephemera, the shaker packet, and this beautiful ribbon and the leaf die. I begin by putting 3 pieces of double-sided adhesive in the center of the card base, and then adhered the piece of the mesh material down onto it. This will keep it steady so that I can glue down the top of that material to the card base, as well as the bottom of the material to the card base. I then use some of the distress inks and add a little bit of grunge around the outside border of this piece of patterned cardstock. I used the leaf die to cut out the center as a leaf shape. I then flipped over the panel, glued down some acetate onto the back of it, and then trimmed away the excess acetate at the bottom. This is going to create my shaker window. I put some double-sided foam tape strips around the perimeter of the leaf. This will go ahead and create the mechanism to contain my shaker bits. The double-sided foam tape prevents them from moving out as I shake the card. I then put additional foam tape strips around the card, making sure that it's going to be adhered down to the backing piece of it. Again, to make sure that that whole panel is going to be level. I then remove the backing from the foam tape, take my shaker mix and sprinkle it into the center of the shaker area, and then adhere down my backing panel. It's easy to line up since both pieces of cardstock are the same size. And as you can see, it shakes very well. I put double-sided adhesive onto the back of that shaker panel and adhere it down onto the card base. I then put a ring of craft glue going around the outside perimeter of the leaf shape, and then take that beautiful twine ribbon and position it around in a circular feature to create almost like a wreath. Hold it down, applying some pressure as the glue dries, and then continue going on to the other side, and hold it in place until it dries again. You can add some extra dots of glue wherever you need to reinforce your positioning. And holding it in place for just a few seconds really helps as that glue sets. Happy with that, I used a combination of a dot of craft glue and a little bit of super glue to put 3 acorns onto the wreath. Since these are a little bit heavier than the material, I want to make sure that they'll stay in place, and that super glue combination really reinforces them. Just be careful not to get any super glue on your fingers. I used a scrap strip of the cardstock, put some distress ink on it, stamped my sentiment, and then ran the ink around the outside edge of the strip. I put some double-sided foam tape strips onto the back of it, and then went ahead and adhered it down at the bottom center of my card. And that finishes our 4th card, which I think is a really fun autumn shaker. Okay, so in summary, here are the 4 designs that we made with the kit for this video. Here we have the one that we did the wet stamp that you can see it created like that little bit of dripping and shadow. I didn't do as much spray on it as I would have if I really wanted a long drip. I just wanted the shadow effect to come in, and I think that's really, really pretty. We then have the second one where we have kind of that autumn ombre, I call it, of hearts coming down the back, the couple, the flower sprays, crisp air, golden leaves, and whispered dreams. Then have this, which I think is really pretty and a lot of fun. We have that beautiful paper with the really pretty leaves cut out of the patterned paper. Our star in the center being this beautiful piece of ephemera with the watering can and the flowers, and of course the nice addition of these leaves, these green leaves, just kind of adding a little bit of a pop and a little bit of bling to the card. And then fourth, we have our Autumn Shaker card, which is really pretty. We have that Autumn Shaker mix that gives that metallic pop and the bright colors, featured prominently inside the window of the cutout leaf, surrounded by the twine and green leaf ribbon wreath that I built around it and glued down, and embellished further with these beautiful gold acorns. We have our sentiment strip, and then that's set against a card base that has a lot of texture brought in as well. So those are the 4 designs. I hope that you enjoyed watching each of these, and I hope that you enjoyed learning, maybe even a new technique with that wet stamping. And I'll be back again with another video on my channel with another 4 cards from this kit sometime real soon. Until then, be well.